Hello everyone and welcome to the first revision session then. So I can see that the majority of you are here, so we'll get started in 1 minute. While we're waiting though, I thought I'd just show you this article which I've just shared with you. So I'll just turn to page 10 and this is the actual writer. So while we're waiting, have a little read of, obviously starting from here, walking downwards. Let's have a little read of that and we'll get started in 2 minutes. Right everyone, welcome to the revision session. We will get started now then. So we're going to be looking at this poem, The Emigrant, and we're also going to compare it to London by William Blake. So you know yourself how familiar you are with these two poems. What I suggest you do is use BBC Bite Size, use the Poetry Revision, the CGP. If you haven't got that yet, you can order it on Parent Pay. I'd really recommend that. You can look on the general internet. But basically, I think you're going to get a question on either power or conflict, or it might be an aspect of power or conflict. So be thinking about how power is presented. So I'll tell you what, we're going to start with London. So the first thing to say is let's talk about first of all the context. So what we'd do is get your A3 sheet that I gave you this morning. And first of all, William Blake is a romantic. That's the first thing to say. A romantic poet. So that's like Wordsworth, and it's like Percy Shelley too. It's autobiographical. He lived in London himself. So it's obviously called London. He used to live in Soho. And London that he saw, Soho, if you know London very well, it's quite a seedy area, even in 2020. But in the sort of 1700s, probably 1780s, 70s, and 90s, this was written. Let me get the exact date for you a second. Look at the revision guide. Yeah, 1794 it was. So 1794, and it's basically describing London. And as I'm sure Miss Hutchins or maybe Miss Patrick told you, it's basically a journey. So I'm going to read it to you, and I'm just going to tell you all the things you can see and all the things that you can hear. So I wander through each chartered street. Chartered, by the way, just means privately owned. So the idea about capitalism. And the chartered Thames. Now, a lot of students say Thames, but as in the River Thames, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But even that is privately owned. Everything in London is owned by these capitalists. Near where the chartered Thameses flow, and marking every face I meet marks a weakness, marks a woe. So in terms of what you can see your streets, then you can see the River Thames, then you basically can see people. But the people are basically ill because they've got marks of weakness, marks of woe. Now, that marks of weakness might literally be malnutrition. They might have like scurvy because they don't eat fruit and vegetables. But marks of woe, that's unhappiness. It's the idea that these people look ill and they're unhappy, and they're probably unhappy because they're ill and because they're malnutritioned and they're exploited. So, in every cry of every man, so now you can hear a man crying, every infant's cry of fear. Now, hearing, I don't know if you've ever got any younger brothers or sisters or nieces or nephews or cousins, you know, hearing a baby cry actually is quite a natural cry. However, a baby crying because of fear, that's a really depressing image, I think. Babies don't cry because of fear. They cry because they're hungry, or because they need the nappy change, or because they are bored, or because they're tired. They don't cry out of fear. In every voice and every band, they hear man, babies, and just everyone crying. And even hear a band. A band's basically a town crier. It's almost like people couldn't read or write there in London in 1794. So everyone is how they get their information from a town crier who would literally shout from the street, like the news and things like that. Now, best quote probably ever. I'm going to highlight it in my nice orange pen. Mind forged manacles I hear. Now, quite simply, manacles are basically chains. So they can hear chains. And we'll come back to that quote in a moment. How the chimney sweepers cry. So you can see some chimney sweepers. And they're crying, of course. I remember chimney sweepers. If you think about Oliver Twist, which is probably published a bit after this. They're basically children. They're even younger than you. Blackening church appalls. The church, now it's black, and that's symbolic. It might be black because of all the industrialisation, but actually it's probably black because of the corruption. Hapless soldiers sigh. So you can hear a soldier sighing. Runs in blood down palace walls. That's obviously a metaphor. There isn't literally blood running down the palace walls, but they've almost like that idea. They've got blood on their hands. Blood on hands. They're culpable for all the misery that's happening in London. But out of everything they can hear, through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlots curse. Now, a harlot, I'm sure Miss Hutchins or Miss Patrick told you, is basically a prostitute. Youthful harlot, though, a child prostitute. We're talking someone that's maybe 11, 12 years old. Now, this is a really quite complex bit, but they're cursing and they're blasting the newborn infant's tear. So again, it's a child crying, or a baby crying, I should say, but they're cursing a baby crying. We think about why would they curse a baby crying? And blights with plagues and marriage hearse. So blights and blasts and curse, they all basically mean the same thing. They all basically mean curse. With plagues, the marriage hearse. Now, that's an oxymoron. I'm going to highlight this again in orange. Now, that's a weird quotation. Let me just see if I can get this a bit more. A marriage hearse is an oxymoron. Now, a hearse is to do with funerals, I'm sure you know. Yet a funeral and a marriage put together is an oxymoron. Now, the reason that is because, let's go back to marks of weakness, marks of woe. Now, all of a sudden, this has got more meaning than just being weak, as in ill. It could be to do with being morally weak, giving in to temptation. Now, I told you I'm obsessed with food. I get home in the evenings, maybe about probably 6 o'clock tonight. Straight away, I'll be eating loads and loads of food. I've got no willpower. These people have got no willpower, but their willpower isn't to do with, say, food. It's to do with morals. And it certainly links in with this idea about this youthful harlot. So maybe these men are, because they're morally weak, they're giving into temptation, they're sleeping with or having sex with these youthful harlots who have probably got a variety of STDs, like syphilis. Now, syphilis now can be treated. Syphilis in 1794 would kill you. It would literally start burrowing away in your brain, and your skull would literally start to disintegrate, and you go blind. A really horrible way to die. However, after sleeping with these prostitutes, they would then sleep with their wife, and then they would also give her syphilis, and therefore that is why marriage is like a hearse. It's like a funeral, because these STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, are being transmitted even to wives who are totally oblivious to what their husband's been getting up to. Now, they're also weak because, let's go back to this quote. So that's basically what the poem's about. This quite mind forged manacles, let's talk about that for a second. That basically means these chains. Now, forged, if you know what a forge is, think of like, I don't know if anyone does horse riding or pony trekking or anything like that. Or think about a blacksmith. A blacksmith forge is basically a bit like basically an oven, and the work of the blacksmith would basically heat up iron and basically hammer it until he could make things like horseshoes or manacles and cuffs, which is what he's doing here. However, these forges aren't being made in a shop or a forge, they're being made in your mind. So the idea is that all the people have got marks of weakness, marks of woe, they're unhappy, but the reason they're being happy is because of themselves. It might be guilt, or it might be a lack of ambition. Now, you are all ambitious people. I'm thinking in 1 year's time, I'm hoping you'll be at St. Peter's Sixth Form. At St. Peter's Sixth Form, you'll be at Tudor Grange or Solihull, you'll be doing A-levels. And then in 3 or 4 years' time, you'll be at university. And in 5 years' time, you'll have a well-paid graduate job. And in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, you're going to be extremely successful. Nice car, nice house, etc. These people, though, are not like you. They are morally weak, and they've got a lack of ambition, and they've got no pride, and they've got no confidence. And that is why London is a horrible place to live, because of all the exploitation and the misery. But actually, the people that live there are not nice people, and they are sleeping with prostitutes, and they are stealing, and they are infecting each other, and they're unhappy. So it's just generally a horrible, horrible place to live. And when William Blake, being a romantic, wouldn't like this. He'd be disgusted by it. He believes that, a romantic poet believes that man and women have choice, and they make choices, and they make their own happiness. They don't believe that they should give in to sort of temptation. So that's the idea behind it. So in that case, let's talk about, we've talked about what the poem's about, and we've also talked about the best quotes would probably be Mind Forged Manacles and Marriage Hearse. Now, structure, do you notice that we've got every, in every? So you got that repetition. Sometimes a structure. You've got repetition. Or if you want, you could talk about significant last line, if you like that line. Now, repetition in every, basically, it's all encompassing. It's in every cry of every man. It's in every infant's cry of fear. It's in every voice. Everyone is crying. It's not like the poor people are unhappy. Everyone is unhappy. And also every. It's the idea of being monotonous. Having a job, you come to work, you get paid poorly, you go home. You come to work, you get paid poorly, you don't enjoy your job, you go home. It's over and over again. Or every. That almost industrial tread, like a factory. It's almost like the mechanical noise of a machine, for example. And another thing about context is around this time, go back up here, you've got the Industrial Revolution. Now, historians will know that the Industrial Revolution was a time of change. People don't like change. And that's when people move from the countryside, and London and Birmingham will become more and more urban, and more industries and factories will be built. So it's going from the idea about being like on a farm in feudal times and living off the country to going to the city and having a job in a factory. And the Industrial Revolution, well, Blake didn't like it. He liked the idea about nature, as you know from, say, Ozymandias or from the Prelude. So that is basically what London's about. I hope that's fairly clear. So I'll let you just pause for a minute, and feel free if you want. I'll check my email now. Let me know if you want me to go over anything else. So here's your chance to email me or go in the chat, etc. I've got no emails at the moment, so we'll start again in about a minute. Right, so the Emigree. So remember what you've just said about London. Let's look at the Emigree. Now again, I don't know how you're familiar with it, but the Emigree, it basically means it's immigrants. Now let's talk about geography for a moment. An immigrant is someone that comes into this country. So unfortunately, the Daily Mail and other right-wing newspapers, especially the Daily Mail, are often talking about immigrants, and any crime that happens, of course, is caused by the immigrants. There's too many immigrants. And, you know, Nigel Farage is there in Dover watching people, refugees in fact, come over, risking their life to basically get a better life and get away from a war-torn country. An immigrant, though, is someone that leaves. So let's just say we all went to live in Australia. We will be immigrants of Australia, will be immigrants from here. So that's what it basically means. Now, there was once a country. So the idea is, of course, let's just talk about what the poem's about first of all. It's about someone having to leave their country. Now, there once is a bit like a fairy tale. And if you've read that article that I emailed, she's saying it's supposed to be a fairy tale. This country, without getting too deep too quickly, is a metaphor. It could be a feeling. It could be a place. It could be a time. So the idea is it's a time that you can't get back to. It might be like a relationship even. So this idea about this city, it used to be a beautiful place, and it still is beautiful, but it's been corrupted and it's been taken over. And if you've read the article, it could be sort of based in sort of Czechoslovakia, which is sort of like the Czech Republic now, and that sort of Eastern Bloc. So you've probably heard of third world countries. Third world countries, geographers will know, are places like, say, Africa, Asia. First world, we live in the first world. We live in developed countries or more economically developed. The second world is basically places like Poland, Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, which all got disbanded probably 20 years ago before you were born. Russia. They are sort of this Eastern Bloc, and that is where she's maybe basing this poem on. So there was once a country. I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight. Now I'm going to write down here the motif, which means a recurring theme of lights. And what I might do, we've got sunlight clear. Obviously, sunlight is a positive image. For it seems I never saw it in that November, which I'm told comes to know mild this city. The worst news I received, it cannot break my original view. It is bright. Fill paperweight. It may be at war, it may be sit with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. Now, think about sunlight. It is nurturing. I'm going to change my colour pen. It is nurturing. It literally gives life. It is bright. It is positive. Really, really important. In fact, just talk sunlight, the sunlight. Now, let's just skip forward really quickly because I just noticed it. Structure. Once again, it's repetition. Now, I'm sure you're all crying out to me if you could, if I could hear you. Repetition of structure. Let's turn over. We've got the repetition of every. They're both using structure. So in terms of an essay plan, the third paragraph, I would say, is going to be about structure. And it's going to be about repetition. However, this structure is really depressing. Every. It's a cycle. So London, a monotonous cycle. The Emigrant, though, it's basically hopeful. So even though she's talking about a place she used to live that she can't get back to, it might be a feeling, it might be a place, it might be a time, it might be a relationship. Even though things are bad and it's unobtainable. So it's no matter how bad things get, a new relationship or a new country, or it's taken over by tyrants, which it says it here, stick with tyrants. And you remember that word tyrant from Ozymandias, it basically means like an evil despot, an evil leader. I think Donald Trump. Even though he thinks the voice of the poem, and it might be Carol Rumens, it might not be. Remember, she wrote the poem, but it doesn't mean she's in the poem. The idea about sunlight being it can't be destroyed. Nature, let's write this down. Nature presides, or prevails, should we say? Nature prevails. So in a way, it's a bit like Ozymandias in some ways. No matter how evil a leader is, like Ozymandias or Hitler or maybe Donald Trump, he can't stop the sun rising every morning. He can't stop it raining. Nature is stronger than a man-made power or an institution like a government. So the idea is quite a hopeful one, unlike in London. So anyway, when she's here, the streets are white. Again, a very positive image of purity of that city. The graceful slopes glow even clearer as time rolls its tanks and the frontiers rolls behind us, close like waves. A child's vocabulary is carried here, like a hollow doll, opens and spill a grammar. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. It may be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes of sunlight. There's no way back at all. This idea now that she can't get back, I'm going to write down bygone, a bygone age. It's unobtainable. See, I can spell. My city comes to me in its own white plane. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing through the city walls. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. The city hides me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. Now, I'm going to say this is, change the pen again. This is figurative language. Now, I think a few of you might have confused you with figurative language. Figurative language is like an umbrella term for metaphor, simile, or personification. Now, let's see about this city then. What's it like? It's personified. I have no passport, there's no way back at all, but my city comes to me. So it's like a welcoming thing. It lies down in front of me. So it's almost like a pet. So it is like an obedient pet, maybe. Docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing. So again, a city obviously can't dance. The idea about, this is, I suppose, a manifestation of pleasure, dancing. People dance when they're happy. Of walls. Now, we'll come back to they in a second. They are basically these tyrants, the Donald Trump, the leaders. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. The city, though, needs to be protected. It's hiding behind me. And my shadow falls evidence of sunlight. Now, what's interesting, this city is basically benevolence, isn't it? So, city, benevolence, kind, that means. It's basically like a pet. And in fact, the city walls, did we mention about city walls somewhere? Okay, we've got white streets here. No, my city comes to me. Yeah, the city. Oh, here we are, the city walls. Now, these city walls are basically a really positive place. They're beautiful. Look about the city walls here. we've got walls here of the city, or a palace, and what have they got? They've got blood running down palace walls. So if you wanted to, you could compare the walls of London or the walls of the palace here being literally having blood running down them. They're being guilty. They are culprits of people being miserable. The city here, the city walls here, are actually full of light and sunlight, and they're white, they're pure. It is a beautiful place. The problem with the city is it's full of people and tyrants. So actually, the place, I suppose, is beautiful. Place equals beauty. The people are basically evil. Over here, London, people are definitely evil and weak. The place, I'm afraid, is not beautiful. It's got blood running down palace walls. It's got black churches. So in terms of the actual presentation of the actual city, London, or this unnamed city, if it even is a city, is really, they're both about cities. This is a beautiful city. This is a really ugly city. However, in terms of figurative language, we've got the personification, haven't we? This is all, if I highlight this, personification, a better highlighter. Personification, it is docile, it is obedience, it lies down, it hides behind her, it's a little bit scared. That's a personification of the city being beautiful and like a pet. Mind forged manacles, though, is also figurative language. It's a metaphor. But actually, it's a very different metaphor. This city has got people who are chained up, and the chains are basically trapping them, and the chains are making them miserable. And their own lack of morality, their amorality, their immorality is making them unhappy. They're really, really weak, and they're trapped. They can't get out. So there's definitely that idea about being trapped here. And have they been trapped here as well? Yeah, the person is trapped. They're circling me. Also, this motif of being trapped. So hopefully you're seeing quite a lot of links here. What else can we say then? So in terms of like a link between the two, if I was going to write a paragraph, I'm going to say paragraph 1, or the big idea 1. Need to think about that. Big idea 2. I'm going to write down the idea of oppression or being trapped. And there's a metaphor of they circle me, or sick with tyrants, which is a simile actually. And here we've got good old mind forged manacles. So definitely idea about oppression. Big idea 3. Let's see. Well, for London, I want to use this every. So I'm going to say the structure represents the tone. Structure equals tone. London is a cycle of depression. Every. The Emigrant, it is, yeah, sunlight. It is cyclical as well, but it's hopeful. And in fact, even though the place is run by tyrants, like I say, nature prevails. Nature, in fact, I might even could mention nature here. So big idea 3, structure, and about equaling tone. It's either depressive or it's hopeful. Idea number 2 is oppression and being trapped. Paragraph number 1, I would say that power corrupts. So we've got the blood run down palace walls in London, and we've got the marks of weakness. They're morally corrupt. And here we've also got the corruption of sick with tyrants. People get power and they become evil, and they destroy a city and they make it unattainable, and that's why people have to leave. So that is basically what the poems are about. So in terms of it, I would definitely talk about, if anything comes about power or a government or leaders or political power, these are two brilliant poems to use. The one that springs to mind, I'm sure it springs to mind for you as well, is Ozymandias would be a really good poem to use. So obviously I don't know what's going to come up in the mock. We do that exam maybe next week. That's what I would, you could in theory write about this if you want. Now, just to finish off, I've got about 5 minutes left. I think what you should try and do is on your notes, maybe use a different colour highlighter. What are your best quotes? So really quickly, let's just go through it. Emigrate. Obviously, sunlight. I'm going to number these. Sunlight is number 1. I'm going to memorise that. I'm also going to do Sick with Tyrants. Number 2. And I'm also going to do White Streets. And I might even do It Lies Down and The City Hides. That's my 4 and 5. So can you all now just highlight 5 really good quotes from the Emigrant and try and memorise them? So while you're doing that, I'm going to stare at it and try and remember it. Okay, let's do the same with London. London, I'm obviously going to use my favourite one, Mind Forged Manacles. I'm going to use Marks of Weakness. I'm going to use The Marriage Hearse. I'm definitely going to use Blood Down Palace Walls. Probably need one more. Oh, every, of course. Okay, so number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So do the same for London, and also spend a bit of time memorising it, because in a minute I'm going to test myself and you can test yourself. So I'll give you 1 more minute in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over now. Can I remember the poems? Okay, let me just see. I might even do a little grid like this. So big idea number 1, I'm going to say the structure. The idea, it's a cycle. So we've got sunlight repeated 3 times, and we've got every repeated 3 times. This is obviously positive, hopeful. This is negative, monotonous, boring. We've got the idea about being trapped. People are oppressed. I'm also going to do mind forged manacles. The idea that they can't escape and that they're trapped and that it's their own fault and they've got no ambition. Mind forged manacles. Now I might do, they're trapped. They circle me. I might even use Sit with Tyrants. So it's personified. And then I just need the rest of it. Trapped, oppressive. Yeah, power corrupts. So it's unobtainable. There once was. We had the White City. And they went dancing, didn't they? Here, though, we've got Marks of Weakness. we've got the marriage hearse, and we've got runs in blood, 10 palace walls. Now we need a little bit of context, so I'm going to add Blake is a romantic, and I'm probably going to link it with that one. He's also influenced by the French Revolution. He basically thought Britain should have an English Revolution. I suppose they did in 1640 when they got rid of Charles I, if you know your history, but he wanted one in 1794. Oh, sorry, I think the wrong way around. If you get the idea. And the other one I'd say probably about that is, yeah, there was is the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution. And there was things like child prostitution, and there was loads of poverty, and people did die of things like syphilis. In terms of the Emigrant, I would probably say something like could be based on like Czechoslovakia. Oh my God, how am I going to spell that? I'm going to write Czech Republic. I'm also going to say about the idea about tyrants and about authoritarian governments. Can I say anything else about context? Let me have a quick look at my notes. Emigrant. Yeah, that would probably be it, I think. Have a quick look. Oh, you could probably just use what an emigrant is, maybe, as your. Obviously, that's very important, and it's got relevance. In this poem, I think, was written quite a few years ago. It's got relevance now. Right, everyone, I'm going to let you go. It is basically been a 38-minute revision session. I hope you found that useful. Please add those 5 key quotes to your revision grid, which I'll email you now. I'll save this if you want to watch it again. You know, you might have nothing else better to do. You might be really interested to watch it again. Please do. And make sure your notes in the Emigrant and London are as good as they possibly can be, because for all I know, one of these poems is going to come up in the mock. And if it doesn't come up in the mock, you can still use it as a comparison, especially if it's about power of the government or power of the politics or power of leaders. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and well done. See you then.
Thank you.